Absolutely. I mean, the communities that we are representing and fighting for, these communities that are deemed as marginalized communities, but these are communities of value. The folks that make up these communities are people that we love and we care for, and they are important and they are special.
Hey, what's up? This is Corey Dion Lewis, clinical health coach and host of the Healthy Project podcast. Now, the research shows that social determinants can have a greater impact on your health more than healthcare or lifestyle choices. The purpose of this podcast is to discuss how to improve health and reduce health inequity by speaking to healthcare professionals, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast, give it a review. Or you can also make a donation to the Healthy Project using the link in the description. It takes 30 seconds and it's super easy. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Now let's get started.
Thank you for tuning in to the Healthy Project. I'm Krisha and I'm going to be your host today. I'm a junior at the University of Iowa, majoring in psychology and minoring in gender, health, and healthcare equity. I'd like to thank Larry for joining me this afternoon. Before we get started, would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, thank you, Krisha, and also a big shout out to Corey Lewis for inviting me on the Healthy Project. I'm a huge fan, and so it's a real honor to have an opportunity to be a guest on this podcast. Yeah, I'll just be brief. I consider myself a local Des Moinesian. My family and I reside here in Johnston, Iowa. Professionally, I am known as a diversity talent consultant. So essentially, I help the organization that I work for find passive talent for open opportunities. But outside of that, I enjoy serving my community, spending time with my family. And again, I'm just grateful to be a part of this show. Thanks for having me.
Of course, we're excited to have you here today. First of all, I wanted to start off by congratulating you on a successful My City, My Health conference. And I kind of wanted to hear what co-founding this conference means to you.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you. And, I'll say, for me, it's a little bit less about co-founding this effort, but more so, number one, just personally, I was excited about the opportunity to connect with Corey to work on a project that we are both passionate about, which is health equity, ensuring equal and adequate healthcare for everyone. So that was number one. But number two, we really wanted to inspire others to have a conversation or have conversations about health in general and the things that we can do in our everyday lives that can make an impact on ourselves and on our communities, even our work communities. And so being able to execute this conference, this experience, and in between panels, walking around, and I was sort of playing a showrunner that day. And so just as I was bouncing around and setting up the next panels and things like that, I could just hear the electricity. I could just hear the excitement of folks talking at their tables or maybe walking around the exhibitor hall. But they were speaking immediately after the first panel, having private conversations amongst each other about what they could do. And I heard connections being formed. I heard meetings getting set. And that's exactly what Corey and I hoped would come from this was action, a little bit less about talk, but more so about folks feeling inspired to take those conversations to the next level. And whether that meant to execute certain actions at home or amongst their community. Either way, I feel like Des Moines is definitely a better community because of this conference, and it feels great to have had a small part of that experience.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like everyone gained like a lot of hope from that conference. And the most important thing, like you said, is they felt like they had something they could walk away with. Like they kind of had like an action plan, setting up those meetings or like how they could get involved in reducing those healthcare disparities, which is great.
Yeah, I would agree. People were feeling hopeful. But most of all, I feel like our audience felt empowered. A lot of people, for a lot of people, the conversation about healthcare or even health equity, sometimes it could just feel like an uncomfortable conversation or maybe a foreign conversation, and maybe an intimidating conversation for a lot of people. But our panels and our panelists, they did a really good job of humanizing these experiences and also, really connecting the dots as to what disparities in healthcare look like. And so I feel like that made it easy for people to look inside and think about what they could do to contribute to righting some of the wrongs in terms of healthcare disparity.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of going off of that, what are your next steps, like in regards to the conference, since we just had that successful one in Des Moines?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, my city, my health. I mean, it's already seemed to sort of take a life on of its own. I don't want to. Hopefully, I'm not ruining any surprises here, but there is another conference scheduled for Iowa City this coming spring. So I'm really excited to put the finishing touches on that. But the goal is to further the conversations. We obviously want to have more my city, my healths. I can promise you that there will be another one in Des Moines next year, but I know Corey Lewis is really interested in taking this conversation not only countrywide but worldwide as well. My world, my health, and so I look forward to continuing the conversation of health equity. I look forward to partnering with my brother Corey in producing events and producing experiences that will move the needle. Stay tuned because we've got some things in the works that I think are really going to shake some things up. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have a lot of big plans in the work. And it's really important that you guys want to like expand your reach and your message just to try to get as many people involved as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the communities that we are representing and fighting for, these communities that are deemed as marginalized communities, but these are communities of value. The folks that make up these communities are people that we love and we care for, and they are important and they are special. When our brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles in those communities are affected with bad health or participating in unhealthy habits, they deserve the knowledge and the proper treatment to become healthier. And sometimes you just have to put matters into your own hands to make things happen. But we're fortunate enough that we do live in we are in a pretty caring community. And again, there was a lot of turnout at this event, and there were a lot of folks that were really engaged in furthering promoting the idea of being an advocate for folks that are a part of those communities. So yeah, I think Corey and I sort of underestimated just how big of a deal this event would be. So we got to keep it going, and I'm really excited too because I'm certain that we'll have more help and more sponsors and more support, which will help to strengthen our mission and ultimately strengthen our communities.
Yeah, it's really important that we all look out for each other. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to hear a little bit about how racism shows up in your work as a senior diversity talent consultant.
Okay. All right. Well, so um, just for simplicity's sake, label me as a recruiter, and I would say that, a lot of the racism that a typical recruiter would face, probably wouldn't be very overt, these days, but there are many. If an organization isn't careful, if recruiters aren't careful, if hiring managers aren't careful, there's certainly lots of bias that can set in when it comes to the selection and the recruitment process. There's certainly bias. There could be bias that's racially motivated. Just a presumption on someone based off of their race or their skin tone. There's ageism, which is another bias that discriminates against people that are of a certain age or maybe are perceived to be a certain age. And so there's so many different kinds of biases that can set in throughout the selection process. Who moves forward, who is granted an opportunity to meet with the leaders. And there can even be bias sometimes just the way that interview questions are formed. And so an inclusive organization will ensure that there is bias training and diversity and inclusion training that's presented on a regular basis, not only to recruiters like myself, but to hiring leaders, managers, and even individual contributors within an organization. Because without that training, then the voice of the bias can sometimes be louder than the sensible voice, and then an action could potentially take place, which could be discriminatory against a certain group. So this is very important that that as a recruiter, I recognize, perhaps what my biases are, and then be proactive in mitigating those biases so that I can be an inclusive recruiter. And the same goes for folks that are in a hiring position. Without proper awareness and without proper training, they could end up in a situation where they're hiring a bunch of people that all look alike and all have very similar backgrounds.
Yeah, I think it's super important to be aware of your own biases because they are always present, even if you don't realize that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have to actively work against them.
Absolutely, yes. Bias is pervasive, and I don't care who you are. I don't care what your GPA is. I don't care what neighborhood you grew up in. Everybody has some form of bias. It's just sort of the way our brain works. We have a couple systems in our brains that help us to solve certain problems. Some of those systems are based off of experience, and some of those systems are based off of actually making your brain process complex information. And it takes both of those systems working together to ensure that there's an opportunity to mitigate bias. But yeah, without knowledge of that, without self-awareness, without training, bad things can happen.
For sure. I know this isn't your first podcast episode. You're also the host of the Only Chip in the Cookie podcast, which discusses your experience as a Black man living in a predominantly white state. What has been the most rewarding part of this experience?
Well, the most rewarding part about podcasting and sharing my experiences, number one, honestly, there was a little bit of catharticism. That's my seven point word for the day. There's a little bit of catharticism, that's a little bit of me being able to get some stuff off of my chest. Me specifically, the way that I grew up being an Army brat, there were pockets of my life that were very diverse, and then there were times in my life growing up where I lived the antithesis of a diverse life. And so going about my life and trying to talk to people about certain experiences that I had, sometimes people could have some empathy with me, and sometimes people just thought I was crazy. And so, I want to say rest in peace, George Floyd, because for me, watching that tragedy unfold and seeing the reactions after that, I just knew I wanted to make a difference. And I knew I had license to do that. And there was, I've always wanted to kind of share some of these stories and share some of these experiences, but I was just afraid. I was afraid of backlash. I was afraid of, what would my job think if they heard me have authentic conversations about my experiences with race. But I took that chance and I made it happen. I pressed the submit button on the podcast, and it was so freeing, sharing those experiences and talking about what I had gone through. But I did not expect the validation that was going to come, following producing those episodes. I began to receive emails and notes and comments on my Instagram page about how certain episodes or certain guests that I brought on connected with them. And, and I had folks from other parts of the Midwest to people in other countries that were able to identify with my experience. And so that was cool. And also, I want to say, another rewarding part about this experience is, I would tell people all the time, I was kind of blunt about this. I would tell people, I would say, hey, my podcast isn't necessarily targeting people like me. My podcast is actually targeting folks that are outside of the groups that I consider myself a member of. And it's for those people that see themselves as an ally, see themselves an ally to African Americans, or see themselves as an ally to, again, other groups that I was a part of. And so I wanted to share those stories to not only just get some stuff off of my chest, but I also wanted to share those stories so that I can educate allies and kind of give them insight on what their coworker 2 cubicles down may be feeling or may be going through. A lot of times, especially around, that George Floyd time frame, that, late May, early June, a lot of us Black folks were getting messages and people reaching out to us saying, hey, what can I do to live a more inclusive lifestyle? What can I do to, denounce racism? How can I connect more with people at my job and things like that? And honestly, depending on the day, I would have a different response. Sometimes I would have very little to say, and sometimes I would have a lot to say. It just kind of depended on my emotions for that day. And I also kind of always carried this attitude of, hey, it's not necessarily my responsibility to teach you how to be a good person. And I'm not saying that was the best way to view that, but there were times when I felt like that. And so I knew that if I delivered these podcast episodes as a certain way, I could not only get things off of my chest, but also educate people as well. And so when people, gave me the feedback of, wow, I didn't know that, or I never thought of this, or I would have never guessed that, just hearing that type of, hearing those types of comments and receiving that validation as well was truly rewarding, because it's truly my goal to help make this world a more inclusive place, to make the workplace more inclusive. And so knowing that people were learning how to be better allies and better advocates, it was truly rewarding, and it meant a lot to me.
Yeah, it seems like the podcast gave you like an outlet to kind of express yourself and let everyone know about your stories, while also at the same time giving your viewers something that they could relate to let them know that they're not the only one going through these hard experiences in life.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head with that one.
I know we discussed many different things today, but what is one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from our conversations today?
That's a great question. Well, I'm just going to echo some sentiments from the keynote speaker of the My City, My Health conference. Renee Hardman had a good message about making deposits. Health equity. I mean, it's a big thing. It's a big task, and it's a grand fight. But I would say health equity also starts at home, and you also have to make sure that you are taking care of yourself as well. And Renee Hardman, I'm paraphrasing, I'm summarizing here, but she was sharing a story relating to her personal health and some changes that she had to make. And she said, I looked at, my body as a bank. And as far as my health goes, there's certain things that I'm doing to or for my body that are either making a deposit to a healthier lifestyle or making a withdrawal from a healthier lifestyle. So, grabbing a big gulp from Mountain Dew is probably a withdrawal from my lifestyle, but ensuring that I'm drinking a liter of water and meditating and getting adequate rest, those are things that I'm doing to make a deposit to my health bank. And I just thought, like, wow, that is such a great analogy. It's a great mnemonic device. Someone like myself, I am completely scatterbrained. In one moment I'm focusing on this, the next thing I'm focusing on that, and then before I know it, I've consumed a bunch of crap, right? But one thing I can definitely do is I can create a mental checklist for myself of 2 to 3 healthy deposits a day that I can make. So whether that's a proper amount of water to drink, or maybe some form of exercise, I mean, that's definitely something that I could commit to. And that's what I would say for folks that were inspired by the conference or other outlets that are mentioning health equity and things like that, and maybe perhaps they don't know where to start. That's cool. Start at home, and think about how you can create a healthier lifestyle for yourself. And I'm sure through that journey, it can help inspire you to think of other ways that you can contribute to a more equitable, healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I really like the bank analogy you shared. And I feel like it's kind of finding the right balance between the deposits and withdrawals, because it's not going to be possible to always be doing positive things, but kind of finding the right balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Balance is key.
Well, I would like to thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. But for those who are listening that would like to connect with you, where can they find you, Larry?
Well, yeah, you can. I'll tell you what, I'll give you my 2 favorite social media platforms. Number 1 would be Instagram. I'm easy to find. You can find me at Larry from Iowa. And also I'm on LinkedIn as well. Truthfully, LinkedIn is my favorite social media outlet, but it's not like maybe as cool to say. But you can definitely, I am an LinkedIn open networker. So, you can find me on there at my government name, which is Larry Twitty. And I look forward to meeting and connecting with anyone that's interested in fighting the fight towards health equity.